Beneath the canopy of the New World lies a continent shaped not only by rivers and mountains, but by memory. Across thousands of miles from the high Andes to the Yucatan Peninsula, colossal stones rise from jungles, deserts, and plateaus. They are temples, pyramids, observatories, and cities carved with a precision that defies their age. They stand in silence, yet they speak, whispering of vanished cultures, forgotten rituals, and cosmologies written in granite. According to legend, these stones hold messages left by gods, ancestors, or visitors from beyond. According to archaeology, they are the work of human communities whose ingenuity equaled their devotion. Between legend and evidence stretches a territory as vast as the Americas themselves. Imagine standing at dawn before a step pyramid in the mist. The stones are cool and damp. Birds call from unseen branches. The sky glows with first light. Every block before you is dragged, cut, and placed without wheels, iron, or beasts of burden. Every alignment corresponds to something in the sky. Why did they build so high, so straight, so aligned? Why invest centuries of labor in shapes that echo constellations and measure time? These questions have haunted explorers and scholars for 500 years, and still they invite fresh wonder today. Our journey begins not with answers, but with a mystery that binds all these places together, a shared language of stone. From the great causeways of Teotihuacan to the cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman, from the ball courts of the Maya to the geoglyphs of the Nazca, there's a sense of design that transcends distance. Legends call it sacred geometry. Modern researchers see astronomy, engineering, and power expressed in architecture. Yet, the deeper we look, the more blurred the line becomes between symbol and function. Was a pyramid merely a temple, or also a calendar? Was a glyph only an image, or a code of migration, myth, or even mathematics? According to Andean oral tradition, some of these works predate even the Incas, built by a race of first peoples who shaped the world before the present sun. In the highlands of Peru, elders still recount how stones once walked themselves into place at the command of sacred chants. In Mesoamerica, the Maya told of Itzamna, a creator deity who taught writing and architecture to humans. In North America, the mound-building cultures spoke of sky beings who instructed them in earthworks. Each legend varies, but each connects knowledge to an origin outside ordinary human reach, either divine, ancestral, or celestial. And yet, for every supernatural claim, there is also a tangible human story. Recent LiDAR scans of the Maya lowlands reveal vast interconnected cities, hidden under jungle canopy, linked by raised roads and reservoirs. These were not the scattered temples of wandering shamans, but organized societies with planners, astronomers, and skilled labor forces. The stones do not deny human achievement, they amplify it. What strikes us is how these ancient Americans combined practicality and cosmology so completely that one cannot separate the spiritual from the scientific. To them, measuring the solstice was also a form of prayer. We open with one enduring enigma: how knowledge traveled across such immense distances without wheels or writing in the modern sense. The Inca road system spanned more than 25,000 miles, yet messages were carried by runners, and their records knotted into quipu strings. The Maya and Aztec developed complex glyphs. The Mississippian mound builders left only earthworks. And still, echoes of similar patterns appear: pyramidal shapes, cardinal orientations, ceremonial plazas. Did ideas diffuse gradually through trade and migration? Did they emerge independently as parallel responses to the sky and the seasons? This is where legend fills the silence left by archaeology, proposing lost continents, sunken cities, or culture heroes who journeyed from one people to another. The magnet of these mysteries drew the earliest European chroniclers. When the Spanish conquistadors entered the Andes, they asked the Inca who had built the great fortress above Cusco. The answer surprised them: not we, but our ancestors in a time before memory. At Teotihuacan, the Aztec themselves were already pilgrims to a city abandoned centuries earlier. They named it the place where the gods were born, and wove it into their own origin myth. In this layering of cultures over ruins, history becomes a palimpsest, each society inheriting stones whose original meanings were already fading. Today, travelers stand before those same walls and ask similar questions. Archaeologists measure angles and tool marks. Engineers model loads and joints. Astronomers run simulations of ancient skies. Yet the full picture remains elusive. For every fact, a legend persists. For every carbon date, a story of gods or star people rises. This tension between myth and measurement is not a flaw, but a feature. It reveals how humans everywhere interpret the unknown, with imagination first, and then with instruments. In this film, we will walk that edge. We will explore how myths arose from the landscape, and how the landscape still shapes our myths. We will meet deities and heroes, but also farmers, masons and astronomer priests who made the sacred tangible. We will follow key stories: the feathered serpent descending the pyramid at equinox, the sun gate at Tiwanaku framing the solstice, the Nazca line stretching across the desert like messages to the sky. We will trace symbols: jaguars, eagles, serpents, the number 13, and their echoes in modern festivals and language. We will see how science challenges old assumptions, yet often affirms the ingenuity encoded in tradition. More than anything, we will ask why these ancient mysteries still grip us. Perhaps because they remind us that knowledge is never fixed. Stone may seem permanent, but meaning flows around it like water. Each generation reinterprets, reinvents, and retells. By listening to these stones, not as static relics, but as participants in a living story, we glimpse not only a vanished world, but our own need for connection, wonder, and legacy. The Americas are often imagined as new lands, yet their monuments are among the oldest standing on Earth. They rise from jungles and deserts like questions carved in capital letters. Who built them? How and why? What messages were they trying to leave, and for whom? This is the journey you're about to take, across centuries, cultures, and cosmovisions, to discover the secrets buried in stone. Long before the word America existed, the continents of the Western Hemisphere were a mosaic of cultures. Between the Arctic tundra and the Amazon basin, people organized themselves into villages, cities, and sacred landscapes. Each region had its own environment and resources, yet across that diversity a few striking patterns emerged, not only in how society survived, but in how they expressed their beliefs. To understand the ancient mysteries of the Americas, we need to step into their world and context: the geography, the climate, the rhythm of seasons, and the sky overhead. Picture the high Andes, a spine of mountains stretching thousands of miles along the Pacific, crowned by glaciers and cut by deep valleys. Here, altitude shapes everything. At over 3,000 meters above sea level, maize struggles, but potatoes thrive. Llamas and alpacas provide transport and wool. Terraces contour the slopes like giant staircases, and irrigation channels bring meltwater to fields. In this landscape the Inca rose, inheriting and expanding older cultures, such as the Wari and the Tiwanaku. Their architecture, tight-fitting stone blocks, trapezoidal doorways, sun temples, reflects both seismic necessity and cosmic symbolism. Move north to the dry Pacific coast of Peru, and you encounter deserts where rain rarely falls. Here stand the Nazca lines, immense geoglyphs etched into the earth, visible only from above. Nearby are adobe pyramids built by the Moche and Chimu, decorated with murals of warriors, animals, and deities. The contrast is startling: barren sand hosting vast ceremonial centers, sustained by canals that brought life from distant rivers. In these harsh environments, sacred architecture was also a form of water management, a way to anchor communities to vital resources and to celestial cycles that predicted floods or droughts. Farther still, in the lowlands of the Yucatan and Guatemala, the world turns green and humid. Jungle canopies conceal limestone cities, where temples rise like islands above an ocean of trees. The Maya understood their environment intimately. They quarried stone, managed forests, and engineered reservoirs. They also mapped the sky with extraordinary precision, aligning structures to the sun, Venus, and eclipses. When you stand at Chichén Itzá during the equinox and see the serpent shadow descend the pyramid, you are witnessing not magic but an ancient calendar rendered as theater. Yet for the Maya, this performance was not mere spectacle. It was the cosmos made visible. North again, into the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, Earth itself becomes the medium. Here, long before Europeans arrived, the mound-building cultures shaped landscapes into platforms, cones, and effigies. At Cahokia, near today's St. Louis, a grand plaza and a central mound once formed the heart of a city larger than medieval London. Timber circles served as solar observatories. Roads radiated outward. This was not a minor outpost, but a metropolis of trade, ritual, and governance. Yet its builders left no written chronicles. Their memory survives in the earthworks themselves and in the oral traditions of descendant tribes. These regions, Andean highlands, Pacific deserts, Mesoamerican jungles, North American river plains, may seem unrelated, but each produced monumental works tied to celestial or seasonal rhythms. Each combined engineering with cosmology. Each left stones or earthworks arranged with purpose. When you look across the map, the diversity is clear, but so is a family resemblance, an impulse to anchor belief in durable materials and to mirror the heavens on earth. This shared impulse forms the backdrop to every legend we will encounter. It is also important to remember that these cultures did not live in isolation. Trade routes crisscrossed the Americas long before European contact. Spondylus shells from the Pacific have been found in highland Peru. Obsidian from Mexican volcanoes traveled hundreds of kilometers to distant sites. Maize, first domesticated in southern Mexico, spread across the hemisphere, adapting to countless climates. Along with goods came stories, rituals, and symbols. A feathered serpent appears in Mexico as Quetzalcoatl and in the Yucatan as Kukulkan. In the Andes, the Amaru, a double-headed serpent, links underworld and sky. Whether by diffusion or coincidence, these images reveal how people everywhere sought to explain forces larger than themselves. According to some Andean legends, knowledge of building and agriculture was a gift from Viracocha, a creator who emerged from Lake Titicaca and sent forth culture-bearers in all directions. Mesoamerican myths speak of civilizing heroes who arrive by sea or from the east, teach the arts, and depart. North American traditions tell of star people or sky beings who imparted wisdom. These stories are not uniform, but they rhyme. They echo a human tendency to trace extraordinary knowledge to extraordinary sources, whether gods, ancestors, or travelers from far away. Modern scholarship takes a different approach. Archaeologists examine stratigraphy, carbon dates, and tool marks. They compare linguistic roots, migration patterns, and genetic studies. They show how maize cultivation supported dense populations, how astronomy guided planting, how ritual legitimized leadership. Yet even the most rigorous data does not erase myth. It often deepens appreciation for it. When LiDAR reveals a lost city beneath jungle canopy, it feels like fulfilling a prophecy whispered by local guides. When DNA links distant populations, it confirms that people were indeed moving, mingling, sharing. The line between legend and history is not a wall but a spectrum. To truly grasp the context of these ancient mysteries, one must also consider time. European maps compressed centuries into a single pre-Columbian category, but each site we visit belongs to a different era. The Olmec carved colossal heads 1,000 years before the Maya built Tikal. Tiwanaku rose and fell long before the Inca. Cahokia's mound builders thrived at the same time as medieval knights across the Atlantic. These were not static societies waiting for discovery. They were dynamic, innovating, rising and declining, leaving layers for us to read. And behind time lies worldview. In much of the Americas, the cosmos was not a distant stage, but an active partner. Mountains were ancestors. Caves were wombs of creation. Rivers were veins of life. The sky was a storybook whose characters, sun, moon, Venus, constellations, interacted with the human realm. Architecture oriented to these forces was not merely symbolic, but functional, maintaining harmony between worlds. To ignore the sky or the mountains would be to risk imbalance. When we walk through these ruins today, we see stones. The builders saw living participants in a cosmic drama. This contextual backdrop, geography, trade, time, and worldview, will guide everything that follows. It will help us read the stones not as isolated wonders, but as chapters of a continental narrative. Only then can we approach the deeper question. How did specific myths take shape around these monuments? Who were the heroes, gods, and symbols carved into lintels and painted on walls? What dramas unfolded in plazas now silent, but once filled with music, incense, and procession? As we move deeper into the story, keep in mind that every site you imagine was once alive with people, children playing, farmers carrying baskets, artisans chiseling stone, priests tracking the stars. Their lives were as immediate as ours, their hopes as real. What remains are traces, stones, earthworks, fragments of myth. Yet within those traces lie whole worlds. The context is not background. It is the stage upon which legends were performed and later retold. Long before ink met paper in the Americas, myths traveled as living voices. Around fires, in plazas, on mountain paths, and in market squares, elders, priests, astronomers, and storytellers repeated the tales that linked their people to the cosmos. These stories were not separate from daily life. They were calendars, genealogies, laws, and maps disguised as narrative. Understanding how the myths began, and how they were first recorded, reveals why the stones and earthworks we see today are wrapped in legend. In Mesoamerica, the earliest written echoes of myth appear on stone stelae and painted codices. The Olmec, flourishing from about 1500 to 400 BCE, left few texts but many symbols. Jaguar-faced beings, war-creatures, and rulers shone as intermediaries between human and divine. Scholars still debate their meaning, but these images seeded motifs later blossoming in Maya and Aztec mythology. By the time the classic Maya cities rose, writing had become a dense script of hundreds of signs. Glyphs on lintels, stairways, and stelae tell of kings, battles, and rituals, but also of gods. Itzamna, creator and patron of learning. Chak, lord of rain and thunder. The hero twins who descended to the underworld to outweed death. These were not abstract figures, but actors in a cosmic cycle reflected in the movements of Sun and Venus. We know some of these myths today through surviving codices, screenfold books painted on bark paper and deerskin, though only a handful escaped colonial destruction. The Dresden Codex, for example, contains astronomical tables tracking eclipses and Venus cycles, framed by deities performing rituals. To a modern eye, it resembles a blend of almanac and comic strip, but to its creators it was a sacred manual. Even without full comprehension of the glyphs, the art conveys a sense of continuity. Humans and gods bound in a dance of creation, sacrifice, and renewal. Farther south, in the high Andes, myths were transmitted orally for millennia. The Inca had no alphabetic writing but used quipus, cords with knots of different colors and placements, to record numbers and possibly narrative cues. Chroniclers after the conquest wrote down what they could of Inca cosmology, the creator Viracocha emerging from Lake Titicaca, the first couple Manco Capac, and Mama Oclo rising from the waters of the sacred lake or from a cave to found Cusco, the sun god Inti and the moon goddess Mama Quilla guiding seasons and lineage. Each of these stories anchored a ritual geography. Lakes, caves, mountains, and stones became more than landmarks. They were chapters of myth you could walk through. Because these myths were living systems rather than fixed texts, they adapted over time. When drought struck, rain deities gained prominence. When a new dynasty rose, it linked itself to older heroes. Myths were flexible enough to absorb history, politics, and local environment. This is why archaeologists often find multiple versions of the same legend carved or painted in different places. For example, the feathered serpent appears as Quetzalcoatl in central Mexico, Kukulkan in the Yucatan, and sometimes as Zehacatl-Quetzalcoatl, a wind god, each variant reflecting local needs, yet sharing a core archetype of a sky-earth mediator. North of Mesoamerica, where writing was rare, oral tradition carried cosmology across generations. The mound-building cultures left earthworks aligned to solstices and river bends, but no written explanation. However, many descendant nations preserve stories of sky beings, great floods, and culture heroes who taught agriculture or law. These myths, recorded by ethnographers centuries later, echo themes familiar from the South: origin from a sacred water source, journeys under the earth, ascents to the sky, transformations between human and animal form. Even without stone texts, the patterns persist like a watermark across a continent. When Europeans arrived, they became unintentional archivists of myths they did not fully understand. Spanish friars in Mexico compiled the Popol Vuh, a kitsch Maya text recounting creation, the hero twins' underworld trials, and the rise of the first human beings from maize dough. Chroniclers in Peru, such as Garcilaso de la Vega, wrote down Inca traditions they had heard from relatives and elders. These records are invaluable but also filtered. They translate oral poetry into European prose, often under Christian frameworks. Yet through the distortions, original voices still resonate. They tell us that myths in the Americas were not static legends, but active blueprints of society. One striking feature of these early myths is their embedded astronomy. The Popol Vuh describes cycles of dawn, darkness, and rebirth mirroring celestial events. Inca legends tie founding ancestors to specific stars and mountain alignments. In the North American plains, some origin stories map the Pleiades or the Milky Way as pathways for souls. Myths functioned as sky maps, teaching people when to plant, when to travel, and how to orient themselves in both the physical and spiritual worlds. This intertwining of story and science meant that preserving myth was as vital as maintaining canals or granaries. It was a survival tool. Another feature is transformation. In these stories, boundaries blur between human and non-human, earth and sky, past and present. Heroes descend into the underworld and return transformed. Animals speak or guide humans. Stones remember and act. Such motifs may seem fantastical, but they express a worldview in which everything is alive and related. When a mountain is an ancestor, building a temple on it is not construction but communion. When a stone idol embodies a deity, dressing it, feeding it, or moving it is an act of dialogue. Because myths were performed, sung, danced, enacted, they also left physical traces. Murals show priests wearing the masks of gods. Ball courts replicate underworld duels described in stories. Processional roads link shrines in the order of a cosmic journey. These material remains help modern researchers reconstruct narratives even when texts are lost. For example, alignments of temples at Copan correspond to the hero twins' path. The Sun Gate at Tiwanaku frames the sunrise on specific dates linked to agricultural cycles described in local legend. Stones and stories reinforce each other. Today, when we walk through ruins and read fragments of glyphs or colonial transcriptions, we are looking at the fossil record of a living oral universe. We can translate some words and measure some angles, but the full resonance of performance, voice, and gesture is gone. That loss is part of the mystery and part of the challenge. It invites humility. We are not decoding a single true version of a myth, but glimpsing a network of meanings that once pulsed through communities. Understanding the origins of these myths also changes how we view the monumental architecture itself. A pyramid is not just a platform for ritual, it is a page in a storybook. A geoglyph is not only an offering to sky beings, it is a line of text in a larger script traced across the land. Recognizing this helps us appreciate why people invested generations of labor in such works. They were building in stone the same cycles they recited in words, ensuring that the story endured even if the language changed. This is why the legends of the Americas are not footnotes to archaeology, but its framework. Without them, the stones are mute. With them, the stones speak of creation, journey, sacrifice, renewal, and balance. They are not puzzles left by a vanished race. They are expressions of human imagination tuned to the rhythms of earth and sky. And because myths live on in descending communities, they are not merely past. They are present, still evolving. In the next phase of our journey, we will meet the main characters who populate these myths, gods, heroes, animals, and symbols, and see how their stories shaped entire cultures. But remember, every name we utter, every image carved in stone, began as a voice in the dark, telling a story to make sense of the stars. Across the ancient Americas, the stones do not only mark cities, they introduce us to characters. These beings are at once cosmic forces, ancestors, teachers, and warnings. They appear on temple walls, in carved lintels, in woven tunics, in dances still performed. Knowing them helps us read the silent architecture, because each pyramid, mound or geoglyph is, in some way, an altar to a story about one of these figures. In the Mesoamerican world, the pantheon is vast, but some presences dominate. Itzamna, the Maya creator, was said to have taught writing, medicine, and measurement. He appears as a toothless elder with a long nose and headdress, a sky father leaning over the world. Beside him stands Ninechel, a powerful goddess of the moon, childbirth and weaving, shown as a young woman or as an aged crone pouring water from a jar, a reminder of both fertility and floods. Then there is Chak, the rain bringer, wielding an axe of thunder. His masks adorn the corners of Yucatan temples, their hooked noses like waterspouts, a prayer built into stone. And winding through this pantheon is Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, whose body undulates down the staircase at Chichén Itzá during equinox. This hybrid creature, bird and snake, sky and earth, embodies transition, knowledge, and renewal. Move west and north, and you meet Quetzalcoatl, the central Mexican counterpart to Kukulkan. Among the Toltec and later the Aztec, he was a culture hero as much as a deity. Inventor of the calendar, discoverer of maize, bringer of the arts. Some stories cast him as a priest-king who opposed human sacrifice and, betrayed, sailed east on a raft of serpents promising to return. Whether history hides behind this legend is unclear, but the archetype endures, a civilizing teacher whose departure signals a moral turning point. Other Aztec gods illustrate the dualities woven into their cosmology. Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird of the south, was patron of war and the sun, his cult fueling the empire's expansion. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, embodied night, fate, and conflict. Together with Quetzalcoatl, he shaped the cycles of world creation and destruction. These are not simple good or evil gods, but forces whose tension keeps the cosmos in motion. Understanding them is like understanding gravity and wind, necessary if you want to navigate the world. South in the Andes, the figures shift, but the themes rhyme. Viracocha, the great creator, emerges from Lake Titicaca, fashions the sun, moon, and stars, then sends forth culture bearers to teach humanity. Inti, the sun, becomes the patron of the Inca state, his temple in Cusco lined with sheets of gold that blazed like daylight. Mamaquilla, the moon, governs fertility and time. Illapa, the thunder god, carries a sling and a club, his lightning the crack of his weapon. Pachamama, Mother Earth, is less a distant deity than a living presence. Even today, farmers in the Andes pour a few drops of chicha beer into the ground before drinking themselves, acknowledging her first. In the highland myths, serpents also coil. The Amaru is a double-headed snake linking the underworld and the sky. Condors, pumas, and snakes form a triad of realms, sky, earth, and underworld, reflected in Inca art and planning. Cusco itself, according to legend, was shaped like a puma. These animal archetypes are not mere decoration. They encode a view of the universe as layered and interconnected, where moving between realms, in trance, ritual, or myth, is possible and powerful. North of the tropics, among the mound-building and plains cultures, stories speak of the thunderbird, a vast winged being whose wing beats produce storms and whose flashing eyes throw lightning. Water beings dwell in deep lakes and rivers. Trickster figures like coyote or raven bring fire, teach lessons, or sow chaos, depending on the tribe. These characters echo older patterns: sky power, water power, the liminal messenger who crosses boundaries. Even where architecture is earth rather than stone, the same motifs rise. What unites these diverse beings is their role as bridges. They link human communities to cosmic forces, and they mark the thresholds of change, day to night, dry to rainy season, childhood to adulthood, order to renewal. This is why they appear in initiation rites, solstice festivals, planting and harvest ceremonies. A deity is not just a character. It is a verb, an action performed in ritual and space. When you step into a temple aligned to sunrise, you are stepping into the body of a myth enacted. Archaeological context confirms this integration. At Copan, stelae depict rulers dressed as gods during ceremonies timed to celestial events. At Teotihuacan, murals show the great goddess with streams of water and seeds flowing from her hands, linking fertility to rulership. At Sacsayhuaman, Zigzag walls echo the lightning of Xibalba. Even the geometry of plazas and causeways encodes stories. Processions followed paths mirroring mythic journeys, carrying effigies of gods from one shrine to another at precise times. Understanding these archetypes also explains why legends persist in popular culture. The feathered serpent becomes a superhero motif. The thunderbird adorns vehicles and sports teams. Pachamama inspires environmental movements. Symbols once rooted in specific rituals now travel globally, detached from their original context but still resonant. They remind us of continuity. The same images carved in stone 1,000 years ago still speak to something in us today. Yet it is crucial to respect the complexity. These are not frozen museum pieces, but living traditions among descendant peoples. Festivals like Inti Raymi in Peru or the Day of the Dead in Mexico blend ancient and colonial elements into vibrant modern expressions. Dances, costumes, and stories continue to evolve, embodying resilience as much as heritage. When we talk about mythic characters, we're not only talking about the past, but about identities and worldviews alive in the present. In this light, the monumental architecture of the Americas becomes a stage. Pyramids, plazas, ball courts, mounds, and geoglyphs are not merely backdrops, but active participants in a cosmic drama where gods and humans meet. Each stone placement, each stairway, each alignment is a cue for a performance, a dawn ritual, a procession, a retelling of a cosmic event. Seeing them this way helps dissolve the artificial boundary between religion and science, myth and technology, showing a worldview where building, measuring, storytelling, and worship are one. As we continue, we will move from these archetypal beings into their stories, the key myths themselves, told and retold across centuries. We will follow the adventures of culture heroes, the trials of twins, the journeys from underworld to sky. We will see how these narratives shape moral codes, social orders, and even city planning. In doing so, we'll deepen our understanding of why the stones still hold power. They're not only structures but scripts, and every visitor is a reader entering the next chapter. Every great myth cycle in the Americas contains what feels like a miniature film, a drama with conflict, choice, and consequence that explains why the world is the way it is. These stories were not simply told for entertainment. They were teaching devices, moral frameworks, and cosmic diagrams. When performed during festivals or etched into stone, they turned plazas into theaters and participants into actors. One of the most striking of these narrative cycles is the story of the hero twins in the Maya tradition. According to the Popol Vuh, two brothers, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, were born of unusual circumstances. Their father and uncle had once been great ball players who disturbed the lords of Xibalba, the underworld, with their noisy games. Invited down for a match, they were trapped and sacrificed. Later, their severed head spat into the hand of a maiden, who then conceived the twins. Even before birth, the boys carried a destiny to avenge their father, outweed death, and restore balance. This backstory was not whispered in private, but enacted on ball courts across the Maya world, where ritual games mirrored the cosmic contest. As the tale unfolds, the twins demonstrate cunning rather than brute force. They endure trials set by the lords of Xibalba, houses of darkness, cold, jaguars, and blades. They trick their opponents, using decoys, transforming themselves, even dying and resurrecting to complete their quest. In the end, they defeat the underworld powers, elevate their father's head to the sky as the sun, and take their own places as the sun and the moon. This story served multiple functions. It explained celestial cycles, justified rituals, and offered a model of courage tempered by intelligence. Archaeological evidence shows how deeply this myth permeated life. Ball courts across Mesoamerica often have carvings of decapitated players, serpents, and underworld motifs. Murals at San Bartolo show young men in regalia resembling the twins. Hieroglyphic stairways recount episodes of their adventure. When spectators watched a ritual ball game, they were not only seeing sport, but a cosmic drama of death, rebirth, and cosmic order, a story about every sunrise. A parallel in the Andes is the legend of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo. According to Inca tradition, the sun god Inti sent this brother and sister pair from Lake Titicaca with a golden staff to find the navel of the world and found a city. They traveled until the staff sank easily into the ground at a fertile valley, Cusco, where they established the first temple of the sun and taught people agriculture, weaving, and law. This narrative did more than sanctify a city. It legitimized Inca rule as divinely ordained and linked their capital to the cosmic center. Processions retracing the siblings' journey reinforced this founding myth for generations. Such stories also encoded migration memories. The Mexica, later known as the Aztec, told of their ancestors leaving a mythical homeland called Aztlan, guided by their patron Huitzilopochtli, to settle at a place where they would see an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a serpent, a vision still on Mexico's national flag. When the prophecy was fulfilled on a swampy island in Lake Texcoco, they founded Tenochtitlan. Here myth acted as a compass for real historical movement, blending symbol and geography. Even in North America, among the mound-building cultures, narrative underpinned space. Some traditions recount a great flood from which survivors emerged onto new land, echoing both ancient climatic events and cosmological themes. Earth diver myths, in which an animal retrieves soil from the depths to form the world, appear across tribes. Effigy mounds shaped like animals, birds, serpents, bears, may be linked to these stories, transforming landscape into a living myth map. What's striking is how these mini-films present a hero's journey that is not about domination but about balance, ingenuity, and renewal. The hero twins do not conquer the underworld by force alone, but by wit, humility, and transformation. Manco Capac and Mama Oclo do not seize land but test it until it yields a sign. The Mexica wander until a vision tells them to stop. These are not tales of sudden conquest, but of alignment with cosmic timing and place. A worldview where success depends on reading the signs of nature and acting at the right moment. Such narratives also justified rituals of sacrifice and renewal. The Maya ball game reenacted the twins' underworld trials. Inca festivals like Inti Raymi retraced the sun's journey and the founding myth of Cusco. Aztec ceremonies of new fire every 52 years reset the cosmic clock, echoing cycles of destruction and creation told in their myths. For participants, these were not abstractions, but necessary actions to keep the universe in order. Modern research adds another layer. Anthropologists note that these myths often mirror psychological and social transitions. Initiation rites transform adolescents into adults, echoing the descent and return of heroes. Agricultural cycles mirror death and rebirth, as seeds buried in soil die to sprout anew. Solar cycles mark the balance of light and dark. Myths give narrative shape to these patterns, making them memorable and emotionally resonant. When carved into stone or staged as ritual, they become part of collective memory. The educational function of these stories cannot be overstated. Without written textbooks, myth was the curriculum. It taught ethics, courage, cooperation, humility. It taught practical knowledge, astronomy, agriculture, migration routes. It gave identity, linking families to ancestors and places. Even today, descendant communities retell these tales not only as heritage, but as guidance for living in balance with the environment. From a cinematic perspective, these myths are ready-made epics. They feature origin stories, supernatural trials, moral dilemmas, tragic losses, and triumphant returns. They compress cosmology into character-driven plots. That is why they still inspire novels, films, and games. Yet behind the spectacle lies a deeper function: to remind each generation that life itself follows these arcs of descent, challenge, and renewal. In telling them, communities rehearse resilience. Walking through the ruins today, you may feel the silence of plazas where thousands once gathered. But if you know the stories, you can imagine the scene. Dancers in feathered costumes, conch shells sounding, incense curling upward, a ball skidding across a stone court as the crowd chants. In that moment, myth is not past but present, enacted by living bodies. The stones are not just witnesses, they are participants, amplifying sound, framing processions, marking celestial alignments. Understanding one of these key narrative cycles allows us to see the others more clearly. Each culture had its own hero twins, culture bringers, or prophetic journeys. Each inscribed its moral and cosmic lessons into space. By looking at these mini-films, we begin to read the landscape as a vast interconnected storyboard, a series of chapters stretching from the Arctic to the Andes, each echoing the same deep themes of origin, challenge, transformation, and balance. In the next stage of our journey, we will look at alternative versions and regional differences, how the same archetypes take new shapes in different climates and languages, and what that reveals about the people who told them. In seeing both the constants and the variations, we approach a deeper understanding of the Americas' stone-bound mysteries. If the hero twins, the sun's children, the feathered serpent, or the wandering founders seem familiar across vast distances, it is because the same narrative bones were dressed in different clothes wherever they traveled. Each region of the Americas took a core idea, origin from water or sky, a culture bringer, a cosmic struggle, and adapted it to its own environment, history, and needs. Seeing these regional variations side by side helps you understand not only the myths, but also the people who told them. In the Maya lowlands, the hero twins descend into Xibalba, outwit its lords, and rise as the sun and moon. Farther north, among the Huastec and Totonac, twins also play ball against underworld powers, but emerge as stars. In some Yucatan towns, the story shifts. The players become brothers who open the way for maize to grow, their sacrifice nourishing the earth. The plotline remains descent, trial, return, but the emphasis changes. Where maize is central, the myth highlights fertility. Where stars guide travel, it highlights navigation. Myth flexes like water poured into a new vessel. The feathered serpent shows similar mutability. In central Mexico, Quetzalcoatl is a priest-king who teaches arts, opposes sacrifice, and sails away promising to return. In the Yucatan, Kukulkan is more a cosmic force tied to Venus and the equinox. Among some highland groups, the serpent appears with two heads, bridging underworld and sky. Sometimes it is a bringer of maize, sometimes a bringer of wind. The icon, plumed coils undulating, is constant, but meaning ripples outward to match local cosmology. This adaptability explains why the motif endured for centuries across multiple empires. Even the founding siblings of the Andes shift roles. Manco Capac and Mama Oclo emerge from Lake Titicaca in one version, from a cave in another. In some provinces there are 4 brothers and 4 sisters, each with a different fate. The golden staff may sink at Cusco, at another sacred valley, or at a local Waka shrine. These differences allowed each region to tie itself to the myth, while acknowledging Cusco as the ritual center. It was both a unifying story and a decentralized network of local variants, a political tool as much as a sacred tale. North America provides striking parallels. The thunderbird is a storm bringer in one tribe, a protector in another, a punisher of disrespect in a third. Water beings are sometimes monstrous, sometimes beneficent, sometimes spouses of culture heroes. Trickster figures like coyote or raven can be teacher, fool, thief, or savior depending on who tells the story. Yet their core function remains: to break boundaries, test rules, and bring new knowledge, often through mishap. This elasticity allowed myths to travel with migrating groups and still feel ours. These regional adaptations did not happen in a vacuum. Trade and pilgrimage spread ideas. Merchants and emissaries carried not only obsidian, shells, and textiles, but also songs and symbols. A traveler arriving from afar might recount a familiar story with a new twist, and local audiences would weave it into their own worldview. Over generations, the tale became indistinguishable from native tradition. This is how myths behave. They are living organisms, cross-pollinating like maize varieties, evolving while retaining a recognizable kernel. Archaeology shows the process in material form. In some regions, temples dedicated to the feathered serpent include local iconography: jaguars, maize plants, water symbols, layered onto the standard serpent motif. Ball courts built centuries apart share the same eye-shaped plan, but differ in orientation or decoration. Mounds in the Ohio Valley echo shapes of animals revered in local cosmology, but align with celestial events like their southern counterparts. Stones become the fossilized footprints of migrating stories. Colonial chroniclers often tried to pin myths down as if there were a single canonical version, but even they noted contradictions. One friar recorded that Quetzalcoatl banned sacrifice, another, that he demanded it. Some said the Inca founder came from the lake, others from a cave. Rather than mistakes, these contradictions reveal the fluidity of oral tradition. Myths do not exist as fixed texts, but as performances. A teller chooses emphasis, audience supplies meaning, environment shapes metaphor. That is why the same characters can be saintly or fierce, teacher or trickster in different mouths. Modern scholarship confirms this dynamic. Comparative linguists trace cognate names for deities across language families, showing how they diverge like dialects. Anthropologists record multiple tellings of the same story within one community and find each highlights a different moral. This diversity is not a weakness, but a sign of vitality. It shows that myth served as a flexible social glue, capable of binding groups together while allowing local identity. Understanding these adaptations also helps us read the monuments themselves. A pyramid may appear the same as another but encode different rituals. A serpent carved on a lintel in Yucatan may mark Venus cycles. The same serpent in central Mexico may signify a legendary king. Without the local mythic context, we risk flattening meaning into a generic label. With context, each stone becomes a sentence in a dialect of a larger continental language of symbols. Regional differences also reveal changing historical circumstances. When climate shifted, myths shifted emphasis. Rain gods gaining or losing prominence with droughts. When new powers rose, founding myths were rewritten to legitimate them. When societies faced external threat, trickster figures might become cautionary tales rather than heroes. Myth is thus both mirror and engine of social change. It preserves continuity while absorbing novelty. Despite all these variations, certain archetypes remain recognizable. The culture bringer from the water or sky, the twins or siblings on a quest, the cosmic serpent bridging realms, the storm bird wielding thunder, the underworld journey leading to renewal. These constants suggest a shared human toolkit for making sense of the world. They appear wherever people watch the same stars, plant the same seeds, and face the same cycles of birth and death. In the Americas, geography and trade knit them into a tapestry whose threads we can still trace today. For a modern listener, appreciating this diversity adds depth. It prevents romanticizing the Maya or the Inca as monolithic cultures. It also honors descendant communities whose versions still live. When an elder in a Guatemalan village tells the hero twin story to children, or when dancers in a Peruvian festival reenact the journey from Lake Titicaca, they are not repeating a fossilized text, but contributing another verse to an ancient song. In our exploration, seeing both the core and the variation prepares us for the next step, looking at the symbols and objects themselves, the animals, numbers, patterns, and everyday items that carry layered meanings. If the myths are the stories, these symbols are the vocabulary. They are carved into stone, painted on pottery, woven into textiles, and still worn as amulets today. Reading them allows us to enter the mindset of the builders and storytellers more directly than any translation. If myths are like stories whispered across centuries, then symbols are their alphabet. The builders of the Americas encoded their beliefs into animals, numbers, colors, and objects so ordinary that a visitor might overlook them. Yet once you know the code, every carving, mural, and textile becomes a page of a cosmic manuscript. In this section we will walk through that symbolic language: jaguars and serpents, condors and thunderbirds, maize and obsidian, numbers and directions, and see how it tied daily life to the unseen world. Start with animals. In Mesoamerica, the jaguar prowls everywhere, on thrown backs, temple masks, painted pottery. It is the apex predator of the jungle, moving silently between day and night. For the Olmec, it represented a bridge between human and divine, appearing in hybrid were-jaguar figures. For the Maya, kings wore jaguar pelts and names, claiming the animal's power. In the Andes, where jaguars are rare, the puma fills a similar role. Cusco was said to be shaped like a puma, its head the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, its tail the temple district. These felines symbolize terrestrial power, courage, and the ability to move between worlds. Above them soars the condor, the largest flying bird of the Andes. Condors appear in Inca iconography as messengers of the upper realm. In Mesoamerica, eagles take this role, often shown devouring serpents, a scene immortalized on Mexico's flag. These raptors embody the sky, vision, and the power to traverse great distances. They crown banners, helmets, and temple corners. In North America, the thunderbird amplifies this image to mythic scale, its wings beating storms into being, its eyes flashing lightning. These creatures do not only symbolize weather, they enact the sky's agency, reminding humans of forces above their control. Snakes and serpents form another current through this symbolic language. In humid jungles, snakes shed skins and appear reborn, a natural metaphor for transformation. In the Andes, the Amaru with two heads links underworld and heavens. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent merges snake and bird, earth and sky, knowledge and movement. Snakes on staircases, lintels, and pottery often mark boundaries, thresholds between realms, entrances to sacred spaces. To step across a serpent motif is to cross into a different state of being. Even humble plants carry meaning. Maize is not just a staple but the substance of humanity itself. In the Popol Vuh, the gods shaped the first people from yellow and white corn dough. Its growth cycle mirrors human life: seed, burial, sprouting, maturity, harvest. That is why maize gods appear as youthful figures, with sprouting headdresses. Coca leaves in the Andes, cacao beans in Mesoamerica, tobacco in North America all held ceremonial roles, linking humans to spirits. Offerings of these plants were forms of speech to the divine. Objects used in daily life could be charged with cosmic significance. Obsidian, a volcanic glass, was a cutting tool, but also a mirror into other realms. Tezcatlipoca's smoking mirror, through which he saw destinies. Jade, rare and green like water, symbolized life force and eternity. Rulers were buried with jade beads in their mouths to carry breath into the afterlife. Gold in the Andes was the sweat of the sun, silver the tears of the moon. Textiles were not mere clothing but portable cosmologies. Patterns of diamonds, steps and crosses mapped cardinal directions, mountains and rivers. Numbers and directions completed the code. The Maya built their calendar on cycles of 13 and 20, producing the 260-day sacred count still used in some communities. 13 layers of heaven, 9 layers of underworld, staircases with 91 steps times 4 sides, plus the platform equaling 365 days. These numbers appear carved into temple dimensions, ball court lengths, and even offerings buried under floors. In the Andes, Sikh lines radiated from Cusco like sunbeams to 328 shrines, a living calendar and geography of ritual. For quarters of the empire reflected 4 directions of the cosmos, each with its own color and animal. Colors themselves were not decorative but directional. Red for east, black for west, white for north, yellow for south in Mesoamerica. In the Andes, similar schemes assigned colors to suyus, regions, and to different cosmic levels. When priests donned multicolored headdresses or painted temples, they were not choosing aesthetics, but aligning space with cosmic order. Even today, festival costumes echo these codes, carrying messages unreadable without the key. What makes this symbolic system powerful is how it fused the extraordinary with the ordinary. A farmer planting maize was enacting a myth. A king wearing a jaguar cloak was not only displaying status, but channeling an archetype. A woman weaving a pattern of step diamonds was replicating mountains and lightning, embedding cosmology in cloth. This integration meant that belief was not confined to temples. It was woven into every aspect of life: diet, dress, architecture, ceremony. It also meant that monuments were not isolated artworks, but nodes in a vast network of symbols. Standing at Chichén Itzá, you see serpents, eagles, and jaguars carved into staircases and platforms. At Sacsayhuaman, you walk zigzag walls echoing lightning. At Nazca, you look down on geoglyphs of hummingbirds and monkeys. Each image calls back to myths, seasons, and directions. Together, they create a kind of three-dimensional scripture that a community could walk through, touch, and renew each year. This symbolic literacy helped societies endure change. When empires rose or fell, the core vocabulary remained. New rulers adopted old symbols to legitimize themselves. Conquered peoples wove their deities into the conqueror's pantheon. Even after European colonization, many symbols survived beneath Christian overlays. Cross-shaped designs in Andean churches echo the Chicana, the Andean world cross. Day of the Dead altars in Mexico combine Catholic saints with offerings to ancestral spirits. The code persists, carrying memory forward. For a modern observer, learning this code is like learning a forgotten language. Suddenly, what seemed decorative becomes meaningful. A serpent on a stairway is a calendar. A number of steps marks a cycle. A color signals a direction. Understanding it transforms ruins from silent stones into speaking texts. It also deepens respect for descendant communities who still hold fragments of the key, passing it on in songs, rituals, and crafts. This is why, when exploring the ancient mysteries of the Americas, symbols are not a sidebar, but the very fabric of the story. They show how people without alphabetic writing recorded complex ideas, and how those ideas still ripple through art, politics, and spirituality today. In our next stage, we will see how these symbols and myths echo in the modern world, in language, festivals, pop culture, and science, and why they continue to captivate global imagination. The stones of the ancient Americas may be weathered, but their echoes are clear. Walk through a modern city or scroll through social media, and you'll see familiar shapes. Feathered serpents on t-shirts, condors in environmental logos, step pyramids in video game landscapes, festival costumes that mirror temple murals. The myths carved into rock have migrated into language, holidays, sports mascots, tourist routes, even brand names. This continuity shows that these stories are not dead. They are living patterns that adapt to each era. Take language first. Everyday words carry ancient origins. The word hurricane comes from Huracan, a Mayan storm deity. Cacao, chocolate, tomato, avocado. All Mesoamerican words attached to sacred or staple plants now circle the globe. Even condor descends from the Quechua kuntur. Each time you speak them, you're repeating syllables, once whispered in ritual. For descendant communities, using native names for places, foods, and deities is not nostalgia, but a form of preservation, a way to keep identity woven into everyday speech. Festivals preserve even more. In Peru, Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun, is reenacted every June 24th in Cusco. Thousands of dancers in brilliant costumes retrace the path from the fortress of Sacsayhuaman to the ancient plaza of the Sun Temple. Though adapted for modern tourism, the festival maintains Andean cosmology, offerings to Pachamama, invocations of Inti in a living pageant. In Guatemala, the Quiché Mayas still perform dances and rituals from the Popol Vuh, blending Catholic saints with hero twin symbolism. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos fuses pre-Hispanic ancestor veneration with Catholic All Saints' Day. Marigolds, skulls, and offerings create a vibrant dialogue between worlds, echoing the old idea that death is a passage, not an end. Popular culture multiplies these echoes. Hollywood films borrow motifs of hidden temples, crystal skulls, feathered serpents. Video games set quests in stylized ruins modeled on Teotihuacan or Machu Picchu. Comic books reinvent Aztec or Inca deities as superheroes or villains. Some of these portrayals flatten complexity, but they also show the enduring magnetism of these symbols. The feathered serpent still flies. The hero twins still descend into underworlds, now rendered as digital dungeons. Architecture and tourism also carry the myths forward. Modern Mexican plazas often frame civic life, the way pre-Hispanic plazas framed ritual, with central squares oriented to mountains or cardinal points. In Peru, tourist trails to Machu Picchu follow old pilgrimage routes. Signage explains solstice alignments and Inca engineering, turning each viewpoint into a classroom. Museums worldwide display stele, ceramics, and textiles, sometimes with descendant artists performing alongside them to restore context. Each of these encounters is a retelling, an opportunity for myths to be heard anew. Environmental movements have also adopted ancient symbols. Pachamama has become a rallying cry for climate activists, representing Earth as a living being. The condor and the jaguar appear in conservation campaigns linking biodiversity with cultural heritage. Indigenous communities articulate land stewardship in terms of ancestral reciprocity, offerings before harvest, respect for sacred waters, concepts now echoed in sustainability discourse. What was once cosmology is reframed as ecology, but the core ethic remains. Science, too, is catching up to what myths long suggested: deep interconnection. LiDAR surveys confirm vast hidden city networks. Archaeoastronomy models show precise alignments of temples to solstices, equinoxes, and Venus cycles. Genetics maps ancient migrations hinted at in origin legends. Each new discovery blurs the line between myth and knowledge. When Andean elders said stones once walked at the sound of chants, it may sound fanciful, but experiments show how teams using rhythmic coordination can move megaliths with surprising efficiency. When Mesoamerican myths tie gods to Venus, astronomers find records of its cycles accurate to fractions of a day. Legends become a different kind of data. This convergence also shapes contemporary identity. For many young people of indigenous descent, wearing a feathered serpent pendant, learning a native language, or participating in a ritual is both cultural pride and personal grounding. For non-indigenous audiences, respectful engagement with these symbols can foster curiosity and humility, an invitation to see the Americas not as blank lands discovered in 1492, but as continents of knowledge millennia deep. This shift in perspective is one of the most significant modern echoes of the old myths. Yet it is important to approach these echoes responsibly. Commercialization can strip symbols of meaning, turning sacred patterns into decor. Misinterpretation can fuel pseudo-archaeology, attributing human achievements to lost continents or aliens rather than recognizing the ingenuity of real communities. The challenge is to keep wonder without erasing context, to appreciate beauty without appropriating. Many museums now partner with descendant communities, inviting them to curate exhibits and tell stories in their own voices, ensuring that the echo remains authentic. Another modern echo lies in our fascination with hidden knowledge. Television shows speculate about secret chambers under pyramids, lost tunnels beneath cities, coded messages in geoglyphs. While some claims are fanciful, they reflect a genuine sense of awe at the scale and precision of ancient works. The idea that there's more here than meets the eye keeps people looking, funding research, and sometimes making real discoveries, like the LiDAR surveys revealing sprawling Mayan networks or the ground-penetrating radar detecting anomalies under Teotihuacan's Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Myth and science once again converge, each spurring the other. Even our metaphors echo these stories. We speak of foundations, pillars, labyrinths, underworlds, rebirth, sunrise in ways that trace back to literal structures and rituals. When a festival is described as a pilgrimage, when a new idea is called a seed, we're tapping the same symbolic reservoir. The stones have entered our speech as much as our cities. In sum, the ancient mysteries of the Americas are not confined to jungles and deserts. They are in our vocabularies, our calendars, our art, our environmental ethics, our digital fantasies. Each modern echo is a thread back to a story once told at dusk by someone looking up at the same stars we see tonight. Recognizing these echoes does more than satisfy curiosity. It restores continuity, showing that we are not separate from the people who built those stones, but participants in an ongoing conversation across time. In the next part of our journey, we will shift from these living echoes to the dialogue between legend and science itself, how anthropology, archaeology, and psychology interpret myths, and what that tells us about human minds and societies. It is here, in the tension between story and evidence, that the mystery of the ancient Americas takes its most revealing shape. If legend is the heartbeat of these stones, science is the stethoscope pressed against them. Anthropology, archaeology, linguistics, and psychology give us ways to listen more clearly. Rather than simply debunking myths, modern research often shows how they encode memory, environmental knowledge, and social values. In the Americas, the dialogue between legend and evidence has been especially rich, revealing not only what people built, but how they thought. Start with archaeology. For decades, jungles and deserts concealed much of what ancient Americans created. In the 20th century, excavation was slow and limited to visible ruins. Now LiDAR, a form of aerial laser scanning, can strip away vegetation in digital models, exposing entire cities hidden under canopy. In Guatemala's Petén region, LiDAR revealed a network of over 60,000 structures, causeways, and reservoirs connecting Maya sites into a dense urban web. What oral histories called great cities that stretched beyond the horizon is now visible on scientists' screens. Legends of vast interconnected realms turn out not to be exaggerations, but glimpses of real settlement patterns. Archaeoastronomy is another bridge between story and science. Scholars measure alignments of temples, doorways, and sidelines, then model ancient skies to see what celestial events would have appeared. At Chichén Itzá, the serpent shadow on equinoxes was predicted, not accidental. At Machu Picchu, the Intihuatana stone marks solstices precisely. The sun gate at Tiwanaku frames sunrise on key dates. Even earthworks in North America, such as the Newark Octagon in Ohio, align with lunar standstills over an 18.6-year cycle. Myths about sun, moon, Venus, and thunderbirds were not mere poetry, but also calendars and observatories encoded in architecture. Linguistics provides another layer. By comparing cognate names for deities, researchers trace cultural diffusion. For example, words for feathered serpent across Uto-Aztecan languages show a family resemblance stretching back centuries. In the Andes, place names preserve cosmological concepts long after rituals ceased. This helps reconstruct migration and contact zones invisible to artifacts alone. Myths become linguistic fossils, pointing to older landscapes of meaning. Psychology enters the picture when we ask why similar archetypes arise independently. Tricksters, culture bringers, sky serpents, hero twins. These appear not only in the Americas but in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Jungian theorists call them archetypes of the collective unconscious. Cognitive scientists describe them as efficient narrative tools for teaching. A trickster story sticks in memory because it breaks rules. A twin story resonates because it dramatizes duality. A serpent bridges opposites because it physically moves between elements. Myths that survive are those that map universal patterns onto local experience. This does not mean every legend is literal history. Flood myths may recall real events, rising seas at the end of the Ice Age, catastrophic storms, or the breaching of lakes, but they are also metaphors for renewal. Myths of beings teaching agriculture may compress centuries of gradual domestication into a single narrative of gift and instruction. By recognizing myth as both record and symbol, science can extract insights without stripping away wonder. One striking example of this interplay is the so-called walking stones of the Andes. Spanish chroniclers wrote that the Incas said walls at Sacsayhuaman were built by stones that moved themselves to the sound of sacred songs. For years this was dismissed as fantasy. Yet experiments with large teams using ropes, levers, and rhythmic chanting show how human coordination can shift massive blocks with surprising ease. The song may be memory of a practical technique framed in sacred language. In this way, myth preserves a truth, though not always in literal form. Another example, the Popol Vuh's hero twins descending to Xibalba, undergoing trials and returning as sun and moon. To a psychologist, this is a classic initiation narrative, preparing youth for adult roles through symbolic death and rebirth. To an astronomer, it encodes eclipse cycles and Venus movements. To a historian, it reflects political struggles between city-states. Each reading adds a layer. None cancels the others. Myths operate like holograms. Different angles reveal different images, all part of one whole. Modern science also challenges romantic assumptions. Pseudo-archaeological claims about aliens building the pyramids or lost continents delivering technology deny the creativity of real people. Archaeology shows step by step how communities quarried, transported, and fitted stones, how knowledge accumulated over generations. Recognizing human agency does not diminish mystery. It deepens admiration. It tells us these achievements are within human capacity, and perhaps within ours, if we had the same collective vision. At the same time, scientific humility is essential. Not everything can be measured. Ritual meanings, inner experiences, oral nuances may never be fully recoverable. Descended communities often hold knowledge outsiders overlook. Collaborative research, archaeologists working with indigenous elders, yields richer interpretations. A petroglyph might be aligned to a solstice, but also to a mythic migration path, known only in oral tradition. A mound might encode lunar cycles and clan histories simultaneously. Integrating these perspectives honors both evidence and living culture. Psychology further explains why these myths captivate global audiences today. Stories of descent and return, of cosmic teachers and tricksters, resonate with our own life arcs. They offer models for resilience, cautionary tales about hubris, and reassurance that cycles of loss and renewal are natural. In a world of rapid change, ancient myths feel strangely contemporary, guides for navigating uncertainty. Science even finds practical lessons. Agricultural terraces built by pre-Inca cultures still function today, conserving soil and water. Maya milpa farming, combining maize, beans, and squash, sustains biodiversity. Andean vertical ecology, cultivating different crops at different altitudes, hedges against climate risk. These practices, once explained through myths of divine instruction, are now studied for sustainable agriculture. Legend and evidence converge again. Stories once seen as superstition encode time-tested strategies. In the dialogue between legend and science, neither side has the full truth alone. Legends without evidence risk fantasy. Evidence without story risks sterility. Together, they give a richer picture of how humans imagine, build, and remember. The stones of the Americas are not puzzles left by strangers, but messages left by ancestors in a language of myth, symbol, and engineering. Reading that language requires both tools and empathy. In the final part of our journey, we will return to the stones themselves, not as relics, but as mirrors, and ask what these ancient mysteries offer us now. Beyond curiosity and tourism, what do they teach about community, creativity, and continuity? Why, after all the research and retelling, do these places still move us? The answer lies not only in the past, but in the future they point toward. Dawn over an ancient plaza. Mist rises from the stones. Birds circle above as light strikes carvings whose edges have been worn by centuries of rain. You stand where countless feet once processed, where drums and shells once sounded, where myths were not read but lived. In that moment you sense why these places still hold power. They are more than ruins. They are mirrors of human imagination and determination, reflecting back to us what we are capable of when we align skill, story, and community. Across this journey we have followed a thread, from a continent-wide mystery of stones to the worlds and contexts in which they were built, from the earliest oral myths to the pantheons of deities and heroes, from key narrative cycles to their regional variations, from symbols etched into animals, numbers, and colors to their echoes in our present, from science's measurements to legend's meanings. At each step the line between myth and history blurred, not because evidence is weak, but because life itself resists neat categories. For the ancient builders of the Americas, science, art, religion, and engineering were not separate disciplines, but one integrated practice of living with the cosmos. What, then, do these mysteries teach us now? First, they remind us that knowledge can be encoded in many forms. You do not need alphabetic writing to preserve astronomy, ethics, or memory. A ball game can be a cosmic drama. A terrace can be a prayer for rain. A textile can be a star map. In our era of digital information, this insight is humbling. It shows that data without story is inert. Story without practice fades. But combined, they endure for millennia. Second, they show the power of collective vision. Moving giant stones without wheels, aligning temples to distant stars, sustaining cities in deserts and jungles. These feats were not accidents. They were the result of communities, sharing a purpose larger than any individual. In a time when modern society often feels fragmented, the stones whisper of cooperation. Thousands of hands and minds working in rhythm, guided by stories that gave meaning to effort. The myths did not only explain the world, they organized action. Third, they offer a different model of progress. The heroes of these myths succeed not by hoarding or conquering, but by aligning with cycles, with signs, with the needs of their people. The hero twins outwit rather than overpower. Manco Capac tests the ground until it welcomes his staff. The Mexico wander until they see a vision. Progress here is not linear but cyclical, not imposed but discovered. This perspective could serve us well as we face ecological and social challenges today. Fourth, they teach continuity through adaptation. Myths and symbols changed across regions and centuries without losing their core. Descendant communities still celebrate festivals, speak ancestral words, and honor sacred places. Even as global culture absorbs these motifs into films and logos, their roots persist in living traditions. This resilience suggests that identity is not about freezing the past, but carrying its essence forward in new forms, a lesson for any culture navigating change. Finally, they invite humility and wonder. For all our technologies, we still stand at dawn before these stones and feel small, curious, and moved. The builders looked at the same sun, moon, and stars we do. They asked the same questions about origin, purpose, and fate. Their answers took the form of temples, myths, and rituals. Ours may take different forms, but the impulse is the same. The stones of the Americas remind us that mystery is not an obstacle to knowledge, but its companion. To study without wonder is to miss half the truth. To wonder without study is to drift without anchor. Together they create wisdom. As you leave the ruins, whether in person or through imagination, you carry a fragment of that wisdom. Perhaps you notice the cycles in your own life, the symbols in your surroundings, the stories that guide your community. Perhaps you see cooperation, patience, and alignment not as relics, but as practices you can revive. The stones are silent but not mute. They speak in a language of alignment, effort, and meaning that transcends time. This is why, after all the research and retelling, these places still move us. They are not only records of vanished worlds, but invitations to participate in a story still unfolding. The story of humans making sense of the cosmos through imagination and craft. Standing before them, you do not simply observe history. You enter a conversation across centuries, one where your questions and choices become the next verse. When you look at a pyramid casting a serpent shadow, a condor carved on a lintel, or a mound shaped like a bird, you are seeing not just an artifact, but an idea that we belong to something larger, that knowledge and beauty can be built into the world, that stories can outlast empires. This is the legacy of the ancient mysteries of the Americas, secrets buried in stone, yet visible to anyone willing to look, listen, and learn. And so our journey ends where it began, at the edge of a question. Not who built these, or what power moved the stones, but what will we build, and what stories will guide us? The answer is open, as it always has been. The stones have shown us one possibility, a civilization that fused myth and measurement, earth and sky, human and cosmic. The rest is up to us.